determine they really should be filing the FAFSA, well, we can send them there. So this student is a true dreamer, and they're going to click on the green button. And just like the FAFSA process, there's multiple year applications open at the same time. There are students who have just started for the spring semester, let's just, for an example, say at a community college, and they want to get a Board of Governors fee waiver, and their campus says, well, fill out the DREAM Act application. If they're enrolled for January of this year, they need to fill out that button on the right, the 12-13 school year application. Okay? Students who are, for example, high school students now who will be starting college in fall of this year, they're going to fill out the 13-14 year application. So we just need to point this out because, of course, over the years we've processed millions of FAFSA applications, and every year there's a few students who fill out the wrong year application, and they're really confused, and we're really confused until we figure out what happened. So this student here is going to click on 1314, and the first thing we ask of them is basic demographic information. Now this, of course, you might imagine, should be the simplest part of the application. But if we get misinformation here, it will possibly delay the student getting consideration or by the campuses or the Student Aid Commission. We're going to be matching this to GPA data that we receive from high schools and colleges. The campuses are going to be matching this application with their admission applications, who's attending their campus. And if, to be clear, that name is not the same on college records as it is on this application, there might be an issue. Because these are dreamers, because the majority of these students are undocumented students, we're not asking for a Social Security number, the unique identifier that it would make it real easy for us to match with GPA records and admission records and so forth. So we need an accurate name, date of birth, a correct address for them that ideally, let's hope, I got my fingers crossed here, the same as on school records, okay? So in completing this basic information, we're scrolling further down on the page, there's some additional questions. And those questions have to do with security information that the student will need in order to access their application later on. So they will select a user ID, a password, and a security question. That security question, you're probably familiar with the concept. They ask a question that probably only the student knows. What was the name of your first pet? What's your father's middle name? What was the name of your middle school? Something like that. They select the question so that if they don't have a pet, then they don't choose that one, but they choose a question, they provide the security answer, and then later on, if they've forgotten their password, they can get into the application. So they should definitely write these down. Now that we've been processing and working with these students since April on the 1213 application, we found out that a lot of them didn't know what their password was. They say, well, I think it was the same as I use for, Google Apps or something. And, okay, they really should write it down and say, this is my DREAM Act access information, and save it so that they can get back into the application should they need to. So after they hit the continue button, and in this application down at the bottom, there's usually a big green, frequently a big green continue button. When they hit that on that demographic page, we just say, hey, here, this is you. Are you sure this is you? In other words, is George Washington really George Washington, or was it supposed to be something else, like Georgia Washington? is that date of birth correct and so forth, because this is the only way we're really going to be able to determine whether this is the student that's going to receive consideration. So if that is correct, then they click on that green continue button. They'll get a confirmation. Now, this confirmation, this type of button that you're seeing that says OK, pops up several times in the application. For this presentation, I didn't show it to you every single time, but this says, hey, you have completed something. You've completed the initial application, you've completed the application, you've completed the signature process. So the student would see this, and they want to continue, so they would just click OK. Then we say, OK, bud, or budette, you wrote down your username and password. You need to enter the application. And this is the same functionality you find on many websites. You set up your account, and then they say, OK, log in, sort of as a proof that you can actually log in with the information you provided. Enter username and password, and then you advance from there. So that initial demographic information is carried over to the first part of the application. If the student had applied last year, they should have a login and ID or password that they can use again. Okay, that's what's supposed to have happened. And when they log in, they say they're going to retrieve an application. And I'm reading some of the questions that have come up here, so thank you very much for asking that. So the demographic begins to populate. If we go further down on the page, then we see that it's asking more questions, but starting around, question 12, question 11, it starts asking questions that were not in the initial demographic information. So this is where the application really starts. We do ask for the student's SSID or state student identification number. Dreamers, undocumented students who attend public schools do get an SSID. So that's a unique identifier that we hope to use in the future with college campuses so that it's more clear to identify exactly who the student is. And so going down the page, question 16, student citizenship status. People have asked 27 times per day, well, why do you have this? Okay? Well, understand that we need to make sure that we know what the student's status is, and if they somehow got past that screen that said you should only fill this out if you meet AB 540 criteria, we need to know if they actually are a citizen or permanent resident or not a citizen or eligible non-citizen. So we ask for this and the alien registration number. There are some students eligible under AB 540 who will have an alien registration number. Not a large number, but we would just want to make sure that we're collecting this information in the event that we need to confirm the student's status. And the campus, when I say the campus, I always mean the colleges, may need this information. So I am going to be talking throughout this application on various things that are not really part of the application, but someone has asked a question about DACA, or deferred action. As you're aware, the Department of Homeland Security in July created a program that allows undocumented young persons to obtain a work permit, so to speak, and they receive a Social Security number with that work permit. That Social Security number they get, it's written on the card, says for work only, and that's really what it is for. It's not to complete the FAFSA application. On this application, we don't ask the student for their Social Security number, so they don't use it. Deferred action allows the student to stay in the country for 2 years and work and go to school, and the social that they get through that process, then they can't use it on the FAFSA. The student population is not eligible for federal student aid, so completing the FAFSA would really not be a benefit to them, okay? Now, on this application, if there's a question like the student's driver's license that doesn't have that little red asterisk, if you can see that, that's a question the student can just leave blank, okay? So we don't need their cell phone number or their driver's license number, if they even have one. They just leave it blank, okay? And if they don't have an alien registration number, or if they have an alien registration number that they received through DACA, they can leave question 18 blank. Those are not mandatory questions. The citizenship question is, because we want to try to make sure that we're working with the right student. But question 17, they can just skip to question 18. So I'm answering some of these questions as we go along. Instructions for this application are available on the caldreamact.org website. They're very comprehensive, okay? This application is really simple. We didn't put in a lot of text, but a student could keep another window open on their computer and toggle back and forth between the instructions, and then they would have received some comprehensive information on what each question is asking for. So when someone asked about questions, about instructions, so I wanted to provide that information for you. So we're just rolling through this application here. It's so fun. Let's get to the question 27, where they list a high school. Now, this is a requirement not just for AB 540 and AB 131, but for the Cal Grant program. So in Cal Grant law, it says you have to graduate from a California high school to participate in the entitlement Cal Grant programs. So we have them select their high school. Now there's a search feature in this, institution name filter. I found that this works best if they just put the first 4 digits of the first 4 characters of the name of their school. So this is McClatchy High School. And I chose McClatchy because it's one of those idiosyncratic type of names. Is it C.K. McClatchy or is it McClatchy? So if the student types in McClatchy or MCCL, they're going to get it. It doesn't require you put in the exact first initial. If the student knows that anyway, they should be able to find their high school on the list, and then they click on it so that we have that information. We use that to match with grade point average information and be able to send reports to high schools specifically on who completed GPAs and who has filed an application and so forth. So we're further going through the application here. And this is a student section of this application. Now, those of you familiar with the FAFSA application, the federal application, are beginning to see an amazing similarity in the questions. And that, of course, is not just deliberate, but was required because state law says when calculating a expected family contribution for the Cal Grant program, you must use the federal needs analysis methodology. So we must ask the same questions as the FAFSA. So many people, myself included, were hoping that we could come up with a more simple application. But we must ask those same federal questions, all 126 of them, and you count all the possible entries they can make. So that's why we ended up with this clunky bunch of questions. But this page is really devoted to the student's financial information. How much did they make last year? Now, when I reviewed and I went through and looked at those applicants that